The sky was black with heavy clouds. Winds roared across the open plains, carrying sharp crystal flakes that cut the skin like knives. The storm came without mercy, sweeping across the land with a force that bent trees, tore roofs, and scattered animals into the wild. This world was known for its storms, yet every time they came, they seemed even stronger than before. Mira stood in the middle of the village when the first waves of the storm struck. She was young, the daughter of an elder, and many respected her, but she was not yet seen as a leader. People knew her as a kind helper who carried water, tended to the sick, and listened to old stories. But she had not yet proven her strength in front of the village. That day her heart was beating fast as she tried to guide the frightened children into safer corners. She pressed her hand against a weak wall, knowing it could fall at any moment. The village houses were built of clay, wood, and woven fibers. They had survived many storms in the past, but the winds of this storm felt different. They screamed with rage, tearing pieces of roof and flinging them into the air. Rain mixed with shards of crystal fell so hard that the ground turned into sharp mud. People cried out as walls began to crack. A mother held her baby close while old men clutched their walking sticks, their eyes filled with fear. Mira shouted to her people, "Hold the ropes! Tie the doors! Stay together!" Her voice was strong, but inside she felt the same fear. She had grown up believing the storms were destiny. The old ones always said, "No one can fight the sky. We bow, we wait, and we rise again." But as Mira watched homes crumble and saw the helplessness in her people's eyes, a part of her wanted to resist. She wanted to believe there could be a way to stand against the storm instead of always bowing. The winds grew louder. A group of children tried to run to the storage hut, but a wall fell in their path. Mira rushed forward, grabbing two of them by the arms and pulling them back just in time. Her chest heaved with effort, her body soaked in cold rain. She looked around, searching for hope, for some sign that this storm would end soon. But all she saw was destruction. Then, through the thick gray curtain of rain, she spotted a figure walking toward the village. At first she thought it was a shadow or a trick of her tired eyes, but the figure grew clearer. It was a tall man, wrapped in heavy clothing that the storm could not tear apart. He moved with calm steps, carrying a pack on his back and holding a rod that glowed faintly with light. He did not stumble like the villagers. He walked as if the storm itself was only a challenge, not a death sentence. The villagers gasped when they saw him. Some thought he was a spirit. Others whispered in fear, wondering if he was a messenger of the storm. But Mira's eyes stayed on him, and she saw something different. She saw strength and purpose. The man reached the center of the broken homes. He looked at the people with steady eyes. His voice rose above the storm, deep and clear. "Come with me. You will not survive out here." Mira stepped forward, clutching her shawl against the wind. "Who are you?" she shouted. "Ryan," he answered simply. "I travel. I study the storms. I know how to survive them." He pointed toward the hill where he had set up his shelter. "Follow me quickly." Some villagers hesitated. Fear of the unknown was heavy. But when another roof collapsed, Mira made a choice. She grabbed the arm of a woman who was shivering and cried, "We go." She turned to the others. "Take the children. Follow him." Her voice carried more power than she had ever known. One by one, the villagers moved. They trusted Mira more than the stranger, but if she chose to follow, they would follow too. Ryan led them with strong steps, cutting through the wind. The path was slippery and sharp crystals cut their feet, but he guided them safely. His glowing rod kept the way clear, and every time someone stumbled, he reached out with firm hands to steady them. At last, they reached his shelter. It looked like a dome of shining metal and fabric, nothing like the simple homes of the village. The entrance opened with a hiss and warm air spilled out. One by one, the people stepped inside, their eyes wide with wonder. The storm's roar became a distant echo as the door closed behind them. Inside, the air was warm and dry. Lights glowed gently along the walls. Mats were spread on the floor, and containers of supplies stood neatly arranged. It was as if they had entered another world. Mira stood still for a moment, unable to believe such a place could exist while the storm raged outside. Ryan moved quickly, handing out small heat packs and wrapped food bars. He spoke calmly. "Sit. Rest. You are safe here." His voice carried certainty, and the villagers obeyed without question. Mira watched him as he checked each person, making sure none were too cold or wounded. His movements were practiced, confident, and filled with care. She realized this was not the first time he had faced a storm like this. When he came to her, he handed her a heat pack. "You were brave outside," he said. "You led them here. Without you, some would have fallen." His eyes met hers with quiet respect. Mira lowered her gaze, her cheeks warm despite the storm's chill that still clung to her skin. "I only did what I had to. My people needed hope. And you gave it," Ryan replied. He placed a container of water beside her. "That is what leaders do." Mira did not answer, but her heart beat faster. She had never thought of herself as a leader. She was only the elder's daughter, someone expected to help but never to command. Yet tonight she had spoken and the people had followed. The thought filled her with both fear and pride. As the night went on, the villagers settled. Children slept peacefully for the first time since the storm began. The old ones whispered prayers of thanks. Mira sat near the wall, listening to the steady hum of the shelter and the muffled roar of the storm outside. She looked at Ryan, who worked silently, checking his instruments and recording the storm's strength in a small device. His calm presence filled the space with safety. For the first time, Mira wondered if the storms were not destiny after all. Perhaps there were ways to resist them. Perhaps the sky was not a master, but only a challenge waiting to be faced. That thought settled deep in her heart, sparking a small flame that would not die. The storm outside raged on, but inside the shelter, a new beginning was taking shape. Mira shivered not from cold, but from the feeling that her life and the life of her people was about to change forever. The storm outside did not rest. Hours passed, and the walls of the strange shelter shook with the roar of wind and rain. Yet inside, the villagers were safe. Warmth filled the dome, and the air was clean. It was a miracle compared to their broken homes. Children slept in small groups, their faces calm again. Old men who had been coughing in the cold now breathed easily. Women whispered thanks, watching the glowing lights on the walls as if they were stars. Mira sat near the center of the shelter. She could still hear the storm, but the sound no longer brought fear. Instead, it made her think. All her life she had believed storms were punishment sent by the sky. The old ones taught that the people must bow, hide, and survive as best as they could. But here she was, sitting in a human-made shelter that stood firm against the storm's anger. She wondered if everything she had believed about storms was only part of the truth. Ryan moved quietly among the people. His steps were steady, his face calm. He checked the heat units and made sure the temperature stayed balanced. He gave water to the thirsty and comforted a crying child with gentle words. Mira watched him with curiosity. He seemed to carry strength not only in his body but in his spirit. He looked like someone who had seen many storms before and had never once surrendered to them. When his work was done, Ryan sat down across from Mira. For a while they both listened to the storm. Then Ryan spoke. "Your village has seen many storms like this?" Mira nodded. "Since before I was born. Since before my father was born. The storms come and take what they want. We rebuild each time." Ryan looked at her with thoughtful eyes. "You believe storms cannot be stopped?" "That is what we are taught," Mira replied. "We say storms are fate. We cannot fight fate. We can only wait until it ends." Ryan shook his head slowly. "That is not true. Storms are not fate. They are only forces of nature. They can be studied, prepared for, and resisted." Mira frowned, unsure. "But you cannot stop the sky from sending the winds." "No," Ryan agreed. "But you can build walls that bend instead of break. You can dig channels so the water does not flood your homes. You can store food in places the rain cannot reach. Humans are small compared to storms, but we learn. That is how we survive." Mira's eyes widened. His words stirred something inside her. "We never thought that way. We believed storms are a curse." Ryan leaned forward, his voice firm. "A storm is not a curse. It is a test. If you prepare, you pass. If you do nothing, you fail. Your people have strength, but you must change how you see the storm." Mira looked around at the sleeping villagers. For the first time, she felt the weight of responsibility. She thought of her father, the elder, who was too weak now to stand against disaster. She thought of the frightened children who depended on others to protect them, and she thought of the broken village waiting outside the storm. If what Ryan said was true, then there was another way, a way beyond fear. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Can you teach me?" Ryan smiled, and there was warmth in his eyes. "Yes, but it will not be easy. Learning to fight storms takes patience and courage." "I want to learn," Mira said. "If I can help my people, I will learn." At that moment, something shifted between them. She was no longer only a villager seeking shelter. She was a student ready to grow. Ryan saw her determination and nodded with respect. The hours passed and the storm outside grew calmer. The wind still howled, but the worst of it was moving away. When morning light finally filtered through the shelter walls, the villagers stirred awake. Some whispered in relief. Others began to cry softly as they remembered their ruined homes. Mira stood up and spoke to them, her voice clear. "We are alive. We are safe because we were given shelter. When the storm ends, we will go back and rebuild. But we will not rebuild the same way. We will rebuild stronger." The villagers looked at her in surprise. Some nodded slowly, others were uncertain. But Mira felt a new strength in her chest. She knew she had to keep speaking hope even when others doubted. Rian opened the shelter door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet earth. The storm had left a broken land behind. Roofs lay scattered, walls had fallen, and the fields were drowned in muddy water. The people gasped at the sight, some falling to their knees in despair. But Mira stepped forward. She turned to them and said, "We cannot weep for what is gone. We will begin again." Ryan carried his pack and walked beside her. "Show them what can be done," he whispered. "If they see action, they will follow." Mira nodded. She gathered the people and led them to the center of the village. "We will start here," she said. "We will clear the debris. Then we will build new walls with stone and stronger bindings." She looked at Ryan. "Will you guide us?" "I will," he said. "But remember, this is not only my work. It must be yours too. If you depend only on me, nothing will change. If you learn, then everything can change." The people began to move. Some picked up fallen wood, others cleared the broken clay. Children carried small stones, proud to help. Ryan showed them how to choose the right rocks, how to place them together so they locked like puzzle pieces. He taught them how to make mortar that held fast even in the rain. Mira translated his strange words into the speech of her people, giving commands that were clear and firm. The villagers listened, and for the first time they saw her as more than the elder's daughter. She was their voice in a time of crisis. As the sun moved higher, a new shape rose from the ruins. It was not yet a full house, but its walls stood straighter and stronger than the old ones. The villagers stared at it with wonder. Mira touched the stone with her hand and said, "This wall will not fall. We will make all our homes like this." That night they gathered around small fires. Though the village was still broken, hope had returned. The people whispered to one another, saying that perhaps storms were not the end of all things. Perhaps they could be faced. Mira listened and felt pride, though she knew the path ahead would be long. Rian sat beside her, looking at the stars. "You spoke like a leader today," he said. Mira looked down, uncertain. "I only repeated your lessons." "No," Ryan said firmly. "You gave them in your voice, not mine. That is what leadership is. You carry knowledge to your people, and they believe because they trust you." Mira felt a quiet fire in her heart. For the first time, she wondered if she could truly lead, not because of her father's blood, but because of her own will. She thought of the storms that would come again. Fear touched her for a moment. But then she remembered Ryan's words. Storms were not curses. They were tests. She lifted her eyes to the dark horizon where lightning still flashed. Her hands tightened into fists. "We will not bow again," she whispered to herself. "We will stand." The night grew colder, but inside Mira's heart burned with new resolve. The morning after the storm, the village lay in ruins. The sun rose weakly through gray clouds, lighting a land that looked broken and scarred. Water pooled in the streets. Shards of wood, clay, and crystal covered the ground. Smoke rose from a fire that had consumed half of a storage hut. The once lively home stood as heaps of rubble, and the cries of the people filled the air like a song of sorrow. Mira walked slowly through the remains. Her feet sank into the wet earth, and her hands trembled as she lifted pieces of broken walls. Children searched for toys they had lost, their eyes filled with confusion. Mothers tried to calm them, though their own hearts were heavy. The old ones sat on stones, staring at what was gone. They had seen storms before, but each time the damage seemed greater. Some whispered that the storms grew stronger with every passing season. Her father, the elder, leaned against a fallen post. His face was pale, his body weak. Age and illness had taken much of his strength. He tried to stand tall, but his voice shook as he spoke. "We will rebuild as we always have. Gather the clay, mend the walls, and hope the storms rest for a while." His words were heavy with defeat. Mira's chest tightened. She respected her father, but she saw the despair in his eyes. He no longer believed in renewal. He only wanted survival. She thought of Ryan's words, of the lessons he had shared. A storm was not a curse. It was a force, and forces could be resisted. If her people only rebuilt the same way, they would fall again. She could not allow that. Ryan stood at her side, his gaze moving across the ruins. He was silent for a while, as if measuring the damage in his mind. Then he spoke firmly. If you rebuild the same, you will lose the same. You must build stronger. The villagers turned their eyes to him, some with hope, others with doubt. They had never trusted outsiders before, yet this man had brought them through the storm alive. Mira saw the way they looked at him and knew she had to bridge the gap. She stepped forward, raising her voice. Listen, the storm broke our homes, but it did not break us. We are alive because we found shelter and because we followed guidance. Now we must learn new ways. Ryan knows how to build against the storms. We should listen and act. Her words echoed through the square. People murmured. Some nodded, others frowned. One of the older men stood leaning on his stick. We have lived on this land for generations, he said. We know its winds, its rain, its rage. Why should we change now because of a traveler? Mira met his gaze with steady eyes. Because our way has failed. Look around you. Our homes are gone, our fields drowned, our children shiver in the cold. Do you want to keep bowing to storms forever, or do you want to stand? Her voice carried strength she did not know she had. The villagers fell silent. Even her father looked at her with surprise. Ryan chose that moment to step forward. He crouched beside a fallen wall and pulled out a stone from the debris. He held it up for all to see. This stone is strong, but if you pile stones without care, they will fall. Watch. He stacked 3 stones loosely, and with one push they collapsed. Then he built them again, fitting them together carefully. If you fit them like this, they support each other. Add mortar and they will stand even when the wind tries to tear them down. The villagers watched closely. His hands moved with ease and the stones locked in place like puzzle pieces. Some of the younger men whispered in awe. Mira saw their eyes brighten with a spark of understanding. She lifted her chin and spoke again. We can build this way. We can build homes that do not fall. We can change, the people began to stir. One by one, they picked up stones and carried them to the center of the village. Women gathered ropes and wood. Children collected small branches and sorted them by size. For the first time since the storm ended, there was motion filled not with despair but with purpose. Ryan taught them as they worked. He showed them how to dig a base that would not sink in the rain, how to tie bindings that gave walls the strength to bend without breaking, how to place roofs so that the wind flowed over instead of tearing them apart. Mira translated his strange words into simple commands, her voice ringing out with clarity. All day they labored, sweat mixed with mud on their faces. Their arms grew sore, but their spirits rose. By evening, a new wall stood at the edge of the square. It was not perfect, but it was strong. When the villagers touched it, they felt pride. Mira placed her hand on the wall and smiled. This is the beginning, she said. Her father watched from a distance. His eyes were weary. But as he saw the people working with new hope, he nodded slowly. Perhaps my daughter speaks with wisdom, he whispered. That night, the villagers gathered around fires again. Their bodies ached, but their voices were lighter. They spoke of plans, of building stronger homes, of teaching the children these new methods. For the first time in many seasons, laughter returned to the square. Mira sat near Ryan, watching the flames dance. She spoke softly. They are starting to believe. They believe because of you, Ryan answered. You gave my knowledge to them in a way they could hear. That is the gift of a leader. Mira shook her head. I only spoke because someone needed to. That is what leaders always say, Ryan replied with a faint smile. Silence rested between them for a while, broken only by the crackle of fire. Mira lifted her eyes to the sky, where distant lightning flashed beyond the horizon. The storms would return. She knew this. But now she also knew they would not face them helplessly. She felt something stir deep inside. Like the first rise of dawn after a long night. It was not pride alone, but responsibility. The people had followed her voice today. Tomorrow they would need it again. She could no longer be only the elder's daughter. She would have to be more. When the fire burned low, Mira stood and looked over the sleeping village. The broken walls still stood in shadow, but beside them new walls had begun to rise. She whispered to herself, "We will stand again, and this time the storm will not take everything." Her words carried into the night like a quiet promise, a promise she knew she must keep. The village had begun to take shape. Walls rose stronger than before, and the people moved with purpose rather than fear. Mira walked among them, her hands covered in mud and her clothes damp from the hard work. She looked at the children carrying small stones, the women tying ropes around beams, and the men stacking walls carefully. Every motion carried hope. Every effort was a step toward survival that had never existed before. But hope is tested when the next storm approaches. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, heavier and faster than before. A cold wind swept over the plains, and the villagers paused in their work, fear returning to their eyes. The storm came with the sound of thunder that shook the ground, rattled the remaining roofs, and stirred panic in the hearts of even the bravest. Mira felt a chill but held her head high. She had learned from Ryan that courage was not the absence of fear, it was the strength to act despite fear. She called the villagers together in the square. The men and women gathered, clutching their tools, the children standing close to their parents. Some faces were pale, others tight with worry. They had seen storms before. They knew destruction. "We cannot run," Mira said, her voice steady. "This storm will come. It is strong, yes, but we are stronger because we have learned. We are alive because we did not give up. Now we must act together, not scatter." Some villagers muttered doubts. "What if the walls fall again?" asked one man. "What if the water floods everything?" Mira looked directly at him. "Then we will fix it. We will work with what we have. We will face it as one. If we panic, the storm will win. If we act, we have a chance." Her words carried authority. The villagers exchanged glances and slowly nodded. Mira had found her voice, and they followed it. It was the first true moment of leadership she had experienced. She knew that her people would watch every action, every word. She could not falter. Rian came forward, carrying small tools and ropes. "I will stay with you," he said. "But you will lead. Your people will follow your guidance, not mine." Mira took a deep breath. She felt the weight of responsibility settle over her shoulders. But it was not heavy with fear. It was heavy with purpose. "Listen carefully," she said to the villagers. "We will check the walls, secure the roofs, and make channels for the water. Everyone has a role. Children, stay close to your parents and help as you can. Women, check the beams and tie them tightly. Men, inspect the walls and reinforce the weak points." The villagers sprang into action. Mira moved among them, giving instructions, steadying hands that shook with nervousness and guiding motions that were unsure. She felt Ryan beside her, a quiet presence ready to help but never taking control. She realized he had taught her more than building techniques. He had taught her how to inspire action. The storm arrived with sudden fury. Rain struck like needles. Winds bent the walls, and the sky split with lightning that illuminated the frightened faces of the villagers. Mira's heart beat fast, but she kept moving. She tied ropes around a weak roof beam and called to two men to secure a sliding wall. She grabbed a child who had slipped and carried her to safety. Fear touched the villagers, but Mira's calm, commanding presence steadied them. They worked together, moving as one. The children passed small stones to the adults. The women reinforced doors and beams. The men braced walls and dug drainage channels to carry floodwater away. The storm roared, but the village resisted. Hours passed, and exhaustion settled over them all. Sweat mixed with rain, mud coated their bodies, and every muscle ached. Yet the walls held. The roofs bent under pressure but did not collapse. Water flowed around the village instead of into the homes. Every success, no matter how small, strengthened their spirits. At one point, a loud crack sounded from the far side of the village. Mira ran and saw that part of a wall was beginning to lean. Without hesitation, she called two men to hold it steady, while others passed stones to reinforce it. Her voice carried over the storm, clear and unshakable. "Hold it steady. Now place the stones carefully. Keep the rope tight." The villagers obeyed, working quickly and with precision. Slowly, the wall straightened and the storm passed around it. Mira's heart lifted as she saw the relief in their eyes. They were beginning to understand that preparation and courage could resist even the strongest storm. As night fell, the storm began to weaken. The wind still whipped through the village, but the rain lessened. Mira stood at the center, drenched, tired, and mud-streaked, but her spirit was high. She looked at the villagers, their faces bright with a mixture of fatigue and pride. One of the men stepped forward. We thought we would fail," he said, his voice shaking. "But we did not. We survived because you led us." Mira shook her head gently. "We survived because we worked together. Because we did not give up. I only guided you. The strength was yours all along." Her father appeared beside her, leaning on a walking stick. His eyes were wide with surprise. Mira, you led them. You spoke and they listened. You guided them through the storm. I did not think anyone could do what you did. Mira felt a warmth in her chest, but she kept her gaze on the villagers. Father, you taught me courage. The storm tested it, and now we know we can face it together. We will rebuild stronger, and the next storm will not take everything from us. Ryan approached her, his eyes reflecting quiet pride. You were calm when others feared. You gave instructions when others froze. Today you led because you believed. That is how leaders are born. Mira smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and strength. She realized that leadership was not about age, blood, or status. It was about action, courage, and the ability to inspire others to stand when fear is strongest. She had done it, and the villagers had followed. By dawn, the storm had passed entirely. The village was battered but intact. Mud and debris covered the ground, but every home remained standing. The villagers cheered softly, hugging their families and whispering thanks to Mira. Children ran through the square, laughing as if the storm had been a distant memory. Mira stood at the highest point, looking over the village. She knew there would be more storms, stronger winds, and heavier rains, but she also knew now that they would not bow helplessly again. She had learned the strength of preparation. She had seen the courage of her people, and she had discovered the leader within herself. As the sun rose, casting golden light over the wet earth, Mira felt the quiet fire in her heart. She turned to Ryan. Thank you for everything. You gave us tools, but I had to use them. Ryan nodded. You gave them life. You gave them hope. Remember this, Mira. Humans can teach, but the choice to act always belongs to the one who leads. You acted and your people followed. That is a crown far greater than any I could give. Mira watched him walk toward the horizon, ready to leave the village. She felt no sadness, only a deep understanding. Leadership was not a gift. It was responsibility, courage, and the will to stand when others faltered. She had faced her trial and she had not failed. The villagers began to rebuild with renewed determination. Every wall, every roof, every foundation was stronger than before. Mira moved among them, guiding and helping. Her presence no longer questioned but respected. They whispered among themselves that storms could be faced, that fear could be turned into action, and that their daughter of the elder could lead them with strength. Mira smiled quietly. She knew this was only the beginning. The storms would come again, but she was ready. She had found her courage, her voice, and her place among her people. She had proven that even in the face of nature's fury, humanity's will and guidance could inspire and protect. The sun rose softly over the village, painting the wet earth with golden light. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a world washed clean yet scarred. The villagers moved among the ruins, inspecting the walls, roofs, and fields. There was work to do, but there was also a quiet joy in the air. They had faced the storm together and survived, stronger than before. Mira walked through the village, her hands still muddy, her clothes damp, but her heart lighter than it had been for years. She looked at the people she had led. Some carried stones and beams, while others helped rebuild the smaller shelters. Children ran through puddles, laughing as they played. Women tied ropes and checked the walls. Men reinforced foundations and repaired the roofs. All around her there was movement, energy, and hope. Her father stood on a small rise, watching the villagers work. His eyes, which had once been filled with doubt, now shone with pride. He approached Mira, his steps slow but steady. You have done what I never thought possible, he said softly. You have led our people through fear and pain. You have shown strength beyond your years. Mira looked at him, feeling a mixture of gratitude and humility. I only did what was needed, she said. The people followed because they had courage inside them. I only guided them. Her father shook his head. No, you guided and inspired. That is different. A leader is not just someone who acts. A leader is someone who awakens courage in others. You have done that. The villagers, hearing the elder's words, gathered around. They nodded, smiled, and whispered among themselves. The respect in their eyes was clear. Mira realized that she had earned not only trust but admiration. Rian appeared at the edge of the village, carrying his pack and walking with calm steps. He had been with them through the storms, teaching, guiding, and staying by Mira's side, but now his journey was complete. Mira approached him. You taught us how to face the storm, she said quietly, but it was more than the walls or the techniques. You gave us the courage to act. I will never forget that. Ryan smiled, his eyes reflecting the morning light. I only gave you tools and guidance. The real strength was always yours. You gave your people hope, and that is the greatest gift a leader can give." Mira nodded. "I have learned that leadership is more than standing in front. It is helping others find their own strength." Ryan looked toward the horizon. "It is time for me to continue my journey. Remember, storms will come again, but you are ready. You carry the courage and wisdom to guide your people through any challenge." Mira watched him walk away, feeling a quiet sense of peace. She knew that she would not see him again soon, but the lessons he had given her would remain. She turned back to the village, where her people were gathering stones, checking beams, and rebuilding what had been broken. Her father stepped beside her again. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have earned more than my praise," he said. "You have earned your place among us as a true leader. From this day forward, you carry our trust and our respect." Mira felt a warmth in her chest. She looked around at the villagers, at their faces full of hope, determination, and courage. She realized that she was no longer only the elder's daughter. She was someone who had guided them through fear and darkness, someone who had faced trials and emerged stronger. The elder reached into a small box he had brought and took out a simple crown made of woven silver and crystals from the land. It was not heavy nor filled with jewels, but it carried meaning. He placed it gently on Mira's head. "This crown is not for me to give," he said softly. "It is for you to wear because you have proven yourself. You have shown courage, wisdom, and leadership. You are the crown of storms." Mira touched the crown lightly. It was cold against her skin, but it felt right. She looked at the villagers, and they bowed slightly in respect, not in fear. The crown was a symbol of her journey, her courage, and the new beginning she had created for her people. Children ran to her, laughing and carrying small stones as if to build their own walls beside her. Women offered her food and water. Men nodded in approval, and the elder smiled proudly. Mira felt the weight of responsibility, but it was a weight she welcomed. She was ready to lead. As the day went on, Mira walked among the villagers, helping where she could, guiding where it was needed. Every action was a lesson for them, every word a sign of confidence. She realized that true leadership was not about power, but about service, courage, and the ability to inspire others to rise. By evening, the village was alive with activity. Homes stood stronger than before, walls reinforced with new techniques, roofs carefully tied with ropes, and drainage channels clear of debris. The villagers worked together not only to rebuild but to prepare for future storms. Hope had returned fully, stronger than ever. Mira climbed a small hill at the edge of the village. From there, she could see the plains stretching into the distance, the mountains beyond, and the horizon where storms might gather in the future. She felt the wind on her face, warm and gentle after the fury of the last storms. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "We will stand. No storm can break us again." Her father joined her, leaning slightly on his walking stick. "You have given our people a gift that cannot be measured," he said. "You have given them courage, knowledge, and hope. That is greater than any treasure." Mira smiled. "The storm taught me more than I imagined. I learned that courage grows when we act, and leadership is born from the will to help others find their strength." Her father nodded. "And that is why you wear the crown of storms. Not because it is given, but because you have earned it." As the sun set, painting the sky with orange and pink hues, the villagers gathered around a small fire in the center of the village. They sang songs of thanks, shared food, and laughed softly. The fear of the storm had passed, replaced by the promise of tomorrow. Mira sat among them, the crown on her head, her heart filled with peace and determination. She knew that challenges would come again, storms would test them, and fear would return. But now she understood that with courage, preparation, and unity, they could face any force. Humanity had taught her the power of resilience, but she had forged her own strength, her own leadership, and her own crown. That night, as stars appeared in the clear sky above, Mira looked at her people sleeping in their stronger homes. She felt a quiet pride. They were ready. She was ready. Together they had survived, grown, and prepared for the future. The crown of storms was not a reward. It was a responsibility, and she accepted it fully. In the distance, the wind whispered over the plains, gentle now and calm. Mira smiled, knowing that her people had learned to stand, to resist, and to thrive. The storms would come, but the village would endure. Humanity had offered guidance, but she had found her crown.